Capitol Report is a production of Senate Media Services.
This week, the majority leader is stepping down and the Hero Pay Working Group inches closer to a decision. Senator Karin Housley talks about the working group, and State Demographer Susan Brower provides insight into the census results. Stay tuned for this week's Capitol Report. Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Loehrke. Wednesday morning, Senate Majority Leader Paul Gazelka announced that he is stepping down from his leadership role. He spoke to the media out at the state fair.
As you're aware, I made a decision this morning to step down as the leader of the Republican caucus in the Senate. I'm actually still majority leader until we have another session, and then both the Republicans and the Democrats pick a new leader. But it's something I've been thinking about for a while. One of the radio programs in town asked me, am I leaning to run for governor or not run for governor? And he trapped me, and I said, I'm leaning towards running for governor. And so that hasn't changed. I certainly want to get through the fair. I just feel like this is a perfect opportunity to really talk to all the people from Minnesota, from all over Minnesota, and just really have a sense of what they think, what's important to them. And so before I make any other decision besides stepping down, I just want to finish the fair, and then I'll make a decision sometime pretty quick after that.
Also this week, the Frontline Worker Pay Working Group began grappling with the parameters for who should receive hero pay for their efforts in the early days of the pandemic.
I believe that many more essential workers were critical to our ability to support our healthcare sector and to support our society, our economy during a very difficult time than what we will ever have money to adequately acknowledge them for. But that the circle is broader than just those providing direct care, because without an army of people behind them, they would not be able to continue to do that work. And we need to recognize the risk and cost that those other workers engaged in.
And it seems as though there is no consideration here of the level of risk. So when I think of people who worked in nursing homes, long-term care, where we had most of the cases, severe cases, as well as deaths, it seems to me that their risk, and also nurses in hospitals, their level of risk was substantially higher. And from what I read in the federal rules, this is in many ways about that risk. And I'm not seeing in what you're talking about, and I think it's really, really important that those who had the greatest level of risk, especially over that sustained early period of time, really deserve some greater compensation.
Whether it has been the people who work in dietary in a nursing home, or the nursing assistants, or the registered nurses. And the first person who testified was my colleague, Mary Turner, who talked about managing and working in somebody's airway. Or the transit worker who talked about someone boarding her vehicle who had COVID. And the driver of that vehicle went home to her multi-generational family, knowing she'd been exposed. Or the gentleman, the meat packer from rural Minnesota, who testified it last week, about catching COVID and how that has changed his life in the way that he continues not to be able to do the work that he loved doing because of the infection, because we expected people to go to work on those front lines. There were people that didn't have a choice and face those exposures that it is hard for us to assess a level of risk that is differentiated because so many people faced an unknown risk and did the work they needed to do.
I think the point you made about the fear of the unknown versus what we know now, the fear was there because these folks knew they were taking a real risk. I mean, there were unknowns, but what they really knew was that they were risking their lives and they were risking their families' lives every day that they went to work.
exactly, there was fear in the beginning for everybody, not knowing if you were at risk or increased risk or what your risk was. There was fear for everybody, but now we know where there was increased risk. There definitely was increased risk in our healthcare facilities, and there was, I mean, most of our deaths came in long-term care facilities. So there was definitely an increased risk. And we know that now. We know that now when we're going to be awarding these bonus pays for those workers.
The Frontline Worker Pay Working Group's recommendations for how to distribute the $250 million in financial support for essential workers is due by September 6th. Co-chair of the group, Senator Karin Housley, joined me to talk more about the panel's progress in deciding how to allocate the money. You are co-chair of a working group that is comprised of 3 senators, 3 representatives, and 3 members of the Walz administration that's charged with determining the best way to allocate $250 million in bonus pay to essential workers during COVID-19. $250 million seems like a lot, but is it really?
Thanks so much for having me, Shannon. I wish I could be there in person with you, but we will. Our next interview we will do in person. And you're right, 250 million sounds like a lot of money. And it's truly an honor to be co-chairing this committee with Representative Ryan Winkler from the House. But there are so many people that were essential and frontline workers, especially hearing the stories throughout the committee. You can't pick winners and losers. So I started the committee out a few months ago, or beginning of August, with why don't we just get everybody in the whole state $50 and call it a day? Because who is more frontline or who is more at risk than the next person. So, but what we are tasked with is just the $250 million and to get that number out. So that's our mission. We have a short window left to do it.
So you've heard quite a lot of testimony from Minnesotans from all walks of life twice a week for the entire month of August. What has impacted your view of how Minnesotans handled the early days of the pandemic in particular, based on what you've heard?
Minnesotans did a great job. I mean, they showed up and they still went to work, even without PPE, without masks, the unknown and the fear. The fear is what we heard a lot during the committee. Nobody knew what was going on. We heard from truck drivers to meatpacking plants to school teachers. And then those, I fight for our long-term care residents. So we heard from family members of residents. We heard from those who worked in long-term care. We heard from nurses. We heard from other healthcare workers. Everybody had a story. Some of them we had never even thought of, those food preparers, daycare, childcare providers, and what they all went through. So Minnesotans did an absolutely wonderful job of showing up and despite all the fear in the pandemic. So I have to give them a pat on the back for that, and really do want to commend them for sharing their stories, because they were heartbreaking. A lot of people lost loved ones, and even with the nurses, I mean, they are in the faces of those, helping them breathe, knowing that they have COVID. I mean, it was really, really tough, and it continues to be. I mean, we're in the surge number 4 of COVID, so it is tough.
It's true. It's not over yet. And speaking of healthcare workers, at the last meeting, it appeared that a divide had perhaps emerged between Republicans and the DFL members of the committee. The Republicans would like to see the healthcare workers in particular receive bonus pay. Where do you stand on that? What is your thought process?
Well, and part of this task that we were given is there was language that came along with the $250 million, and we had to categorize those who had an increased risk of getting the virus by going to work. So increased risk, I immediately think of our healthcare providers. I mean, people go to the hospital with COVID. Our nursing home workers, our long-term care, there were outbreaks there. Nearly 70% of those deaths occurred in our long-term care facility. So when you're talking increased risk, I think that bucket has a much bigger increased risk. And I don't want to exclude anybody else in all of those other categories or sectors, because they too all had risk. Just anybody who left their house and had to go to work, there was increased risk. But is there a further increase of risk that those actually had COVID face to face every day for prolonged periods of time? There were outbreaks. They had to quarantine from their families 2 weeks, and then next month another 2 weeks. So that's what we were trying to make a point of. Did the Democrats think that there was maybe a little bit difference in the increase of risk compared to all of the other sectors?
Well, and speaking of the other sectors, you did hear from workers in industries like transit, bus drivers, meat packing, grocery, childcare, education. You mentioned those, and they continued to go to work. Some had to quarantine without pay. Some became ill. Some people are still dealing with the after effects of having had COVID. What kind of eligibility should these kinds of workers receive?
And again, it's $250 million, and it doesn't go a long way. I know the Democrats' proposal yesterday was $1,500 across the board to everybody. Well, there's 1.3 million essential workers in Minnesota. That amounts to $2 billion. We don't have $2 billion. We have 250 million. So we can't do that. That's just out of the question. But I do think what is a meaningful amount? I think that's what we have to get to. What is really hero pay, or what is a bonus pay to those who continue to show up? One testifier, they still go to work every single day, double mask. I mean, they other sectors don't have to even wear a mask. They are still double mask, full PPE, day in and day out. So I think we really have to put them in two separate buckets. And I know they don't like to hear that, but I don't want to exclude anybody either. So I think if we can get something of a bonus pay to everybody who actually showed up for work, not those who had the option to work from home, and not those who collected unemployment, that actually had to show up to work, they need a little bonus pay also.
Well, as you know, there's been difficulty in a related, in terms of the federal money that was set aside for the eviction moratorium and getting that rent help to the people, who are facing eviction. So that has been sort of in a quagmire. Regardless of how the money gets divvied up, how do you ensure that this $250 million does not get stuck in a similar quagmire and the money easily gets to the people to whom the committee and then the legislature decides are most deserving?
I think that's a priority for everybody on our committee. We've got this money. Let's get it out to the people who deserve it. Commissioners Doty and Grove and Robertson and Senator Murphy and Representative Winkler and Frazier, and then Representative New, Senator Kiffmeyer, and myself. That is a priority for all of us. We were tasked with this job in the first special session. We voted on it, get this $250 million out. None of us want to make it political. These workers who showed up during the pandemic, despite the fear, and continue to work to this day, deserve to be recognized and deserve this money as soon as they can get it.
So a little bit of a crystal ball here in front of you, because we're speaking on a Wednesday. Tomorrow is the final meeting of the committee. This interview will air on Sunday, and the recommendations are due to the governor and legislative leaders on Monday. There's been talk that it needs to be a unanimous decision. Will you be able to agree? Will something come out of this working group?
I'm pretty sure something will come out of this working group. It may not be tomorrow because there's still some testifiers that are going to show up tomorrow. So we might have to put a little bit of an extension on, but I think we are starting to really narrow in on the language and who these sectors are and who we think should get it. It's Representative Winkler and myself have made that a priority to get some language to the governor that we all agree upon. And I think we will. I think we will get unanimous support for whatever we come to agree on, and hopefully by the end of this week.
Senator Karin Housley, it's nice to see you, even remotely. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shannon.
The decennial census aims to count every resident in the United States in order to determine congressional and state legislative representation. The information also provides a treasure trove of data that helps demographers understand population trends. Minnesota's state demographer Susan Brower joined me this week to talk about Minnesota's changing population. First, the big news: Minnesota will not lose congressional representation, but just barely. Meanwhile, other Midwestern states like Illinois and Michigan did. Across the nation, 6 states will gain seats because Texas gets 2, while 7 states lost seats in the census. Why was Minnesota able to hold on to all 8 of its congressional representatives?
It's good to see you, Shannon. Thanks for having me. We had people who worked so hard on the census response in Minnesota, and we held on to that seat by just 26 people counted. Now, we needed to have the growth there in order for that counting to put us over the edge, but because we had such an organized group of people across the state who were invested in this count and who were working toward it for years before the census count, that's really what put us over the edge. So we owe it to all the people across the state who worked in their home communities to make sure people knew why the census was important, why you should fill it out, because Minnesotans did that.
In terms of population growth, the press release from your office said Minnesota had a healthy 7.6% growth rate, which is on par for the nation. Many of our neighboring states, with the exception of North and South Dakota, did not match Minnesota's growth. In a presentation to the House Redistricting Committee, you said that growth is not guaranteed. What contributed to Minnesota's population growth?
So I think there's a couple of things. We've had a really strong economy since we've come out of the Great Recession, and not all states that neighbor us have. And so I think there's kind of a pull factor of people who have come from other states, potentially, Illinois, where they've been losing people, to come to Minnesota to find opportunities to work. So on the one hand, the strong economy has helped our population growth. The other thing is we've had a steady stream of immigrants, of international immigrants to the state, because we have a large and thriving, or several large and thriving metropolitan areas. And so that's helped bolster the growth as well. Some of our Midwestern neighbors don't have those metro areas, and those metro areas tend to be a pull both for people coming from other states and other metros in the US, and also from across the globe.
It's been widely reported that Minnesota's population is becoming increasingly diverse. The state's white, non-Hispanic population declined to 76%, while the Black, Indigenous, people of color population, also BIPOC, some people say, now makes up nearly a quarter of our population. This isn't just Metro, but all across the state. And in a recent Star Tribune article, they talked about a diversity index, about the likelihood of encountering someone of a different race or ethnicity. And Minnesota ranks very, very highly on that. What underlying trends are driving this kind of population change?
So the main thing that is increasing our ethnic and cultural diversity and racial diversity is just the momentum that's built into our age structure, meaning that the more babies we have that are babies of color, the more diverse we become. And so we have more and more people in parenting ages who are BIPOC. And so that creates this momentum toward greater diversity. We have a large proportion of our population who are white, non-Hispanic in the older years, and those are the ages that don't grow. They don't have babies, and they tend to be in the high mortality age group. So there's really this momentum happening toward more diversity that's just built into who we are today. The other piece that increases diversity is migration. So international immigration in particular tends to increase racial and cultural diversity. And so those two things have kind of propelled us forward along this pathway.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in this census, it was the first time that there was greater latitude for people to report on their ethnicity. which included then a very fast-growing category of multiracial. In your presentation to the House members, you spoke about changes in partnership norms. Anecdotally, I can attest just from my children's friends, the school friends, there are many multiracial, biracial friends, and you're talking about younger kids and all of that. So is it simply a matter of time before multiracial becomes one of the most common categories?
Yeah, I mean, we're moving in that direction, and many demographers have kind of looked at the concept of race, and of course, it's a social construct, as we know. And as we move toward greater multiracial identities, the concept of race becomes less salient for a lot of folks. And kind of looking down the road, the question is, will race even be an important thing to measure once we have, a majority of people with multiracial identities? That's kind of the direction we seem to be going. But again, since it's a social construct, it will depend on kind of what happens around the concept of race in the coming decades.
Interestingly, the population was stable across much of this state in Minnesota, with the exception of urban areas. And in fact, 78% of population growth was centered in the 7-county metro area. What does that tell you about the metro area, and what does that likely mean for redistricting?
So the amount of growth in the metro area really picked up this decade. So we've always seen a lot of growth in metro areas, but this decade, that growth was supersized. It was just incredible, the amount of growth that we saw in the Twin Cities and some of our other metropolitan areas as well. And so if we look at the number of people who were added to Twin Cities metropolitan cities, counties, it gives us a really pretty clear idea that there will need to be more districts in that region, particularly the Twin Cities, although we saw growth in the Rochester area and the Mankato area as well. But when we're looking at redistricting, it really is going to have to accommodate that growth that happened in the Twin Cities, and particularly in Minneapolis and St. Paul, where the growth was the greatest.
As a demographer, combing through such a wealth of information, both state and nationally, every time there's a census must just be very exciting. And I wonder at this point, as far as you've delved in thus far, what has been most interesting to you, or what are you most excited about?
Having the granularity that we have is what's the most exciting, because we go through the decade and we have a general sense. We're making estimates generally about kind of where the growth is happening at the city level, but we just don't have that granularity that it's happening on this block or that block. And so I think just to see the tremendous amount of growth in pockets of cities that's what we can look at now that we couldn't look at otherwise. And so for me, it's really nice to have that concrete granularity that we didn't have until now.
And do you think some of this new information then, I assume it will impact your projections for the coming 10 years until we have a new census?
Yeah, it will impact our projections, and it will also impact growth, because just as there is a momentum to growth in diversity, there's a momentum to growth in population overall. So where we see growth, we know we'll see more growth in the decades to come. And so really it gives us a sense of what our future will look like, what future growth will look like, just to be able to see what happened in these last 10 years.
Dr. Susan Brower, it is always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
For more than 20 years, Roy Wilkins was the executive secretary of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The Spiral for Justice Memorial on the Minnesota Capitol grounds commemorates his work for racial equality. I spoke with recently retired CAP Board Secretary Paul Mandell about the memorial and its recent renovation. Roy Wilkins is credited with helping to achieve some of the greatest civil rights advancements in U.S. history. What else is important to know about him?
Well, he was local. He was a local hero, basically, back in those days. Worked through the law system, which is why this whole, the the spiral ends up pointing towards the judicial building. Unlike Martin Luther King, who worked outside the system, Wilkins worked through the system and was working through the legal processes. So that's the main distinction point. He did go on to national repute, and of course he's got the Wilkins Center here in St. Paul and such. Between the plaque and the doors that we are interactive, it tells more about his history and what impacts and some of the quotes that he had.
What did the quotes tell us?
The quotes are sort of give you an insight into both the times that he was working with and his thoughts, because everyone knows Martin Luther King and not everyone knows of Roy Wilkins. So if you start from this end, you get a bas-relief of his face and some biographical, and then various quotes that sort of either depict the time or his work or his thoughts. Sort of his version of the I Have a Dream type thing.
What is the significance of the spiral shape and of the actual shape of the sort of pyramid type things?
I'm not quite sure if he was modeled somewhat after the Washington Monument, but it's purposely ascending as he started his work and became more and more prominent and became more and more involved. It starts off, from his years of leadership, basically markers in time that where he was struggling and not getting anywhere. And then as the pieces rise, he's getting more and more influence and getting more and more known and having more and more success, to the point when in the final end, it all points to the Judicial Center with the reliquary at the end point.
What about the flooring around the spirals? What is that supposed to represent?
It's all representative of African either symbols or patterns, sort of like the Hmong flooring is very, very representative of their designs. But it's repetitive, and it's purposely chained off because in the winter it gets very slippery with the ice, and bronze also heats up, so it gets a lot of sun and a lot of heating, which is why we have wood benches. They're actually wood coverings, because the bronze benches, when we first had them, some people got actually hurt by sitting on them in the middle of the summer.
Oh, ouch.
So we put some teak wood on top of them.
The memorial recently underwent a renovation. What had happened to it over time, and what needed to be done to restore it?
This is all bronze, and the first patination job had been done under extreme weather conditions, and it really didn't take well, and then it had been vandalized over time. The doors had all been broken, either accidentally or intentionally, so some of them were always open, some of them wouldn't open, or some of them were dangerous when they open and shut, so because they're on fulcrums. It needed complete stripping down and a repatination, so we chose the color based on the original intent, which was sort of a warm light bronze. And so they stripped it all down, repatinated it, and then waxed it all so it would stay like this.
So it won't change color over time?
So it won't change color over time. It won't become the green that we see copper happening.
Join us again next week as we delve into more topics affecting Minnesotans. I'm Shannon Loehrke, and on behalf of all of us at Senate Media Services, thanks for watching.